Recently, I took a listening tour to Eastern Oregon to find out why folks out there are so upset about the urban-rural divide. I learned a lot. As part of that, we also visited the tiny town of Prairie City in Grant County. The population there is 909 people. I wanted to see the cultural differences in a small school compared to the big schools in our area. We were not able to fit that story into our week of reports on Eastern Oregon, but I really thought you should know about the school. It's very cool. So here it is. What I found is an institution of learning that is thriving thanks to innovative leadership and determination. When Prairie City's school building was built 112 years ago, it was a bustling place full of people chasing the gold that was discovered nearby. Then came a timber boom and then a timber bust. And through it all, there was ranching and farming. You can still see the influence today. These are some of the school's chickens. Those red things on the beaks keep them from pecking each other. Students raise the chickens as part of their schooling.
All of the eggs out of here go to our cafeteria.
They also raise hogs, which will eventually be killed and served up in the school cafeteria.
It's just different. And some people have a hard time grasping that concept, and that's okay. You gotta move. We know the drill. Amanda Rockhill grew up here and graduated from Prairie City. She's now a teacher at the school. I think that everybody needs to know where their food comes from. Their food doesn't just come from a grocery store. It comes from this. And that's my whole job here, is I teach little kids where food comes from. Really?
In past years, the school, which holds preschool through 12th grade, only had enough students for 8-man football. And some years, it's only been 6.
When my son was...
Chris Camarina is the school board chair. His son played on that team.
So they called him the Iron Man 8. They played both ways. You know, if somebody got hurt, that was kind of the end of the game.
5 years ago, there were just 130 students. A graduating class of 10 was not unusual. But that's changing now.
Crisscross applesauce.
The school population has more than doubled in 5 years to 270 students. You can see it in the preschool class. What used to be only a handful of kids is now a full class of 18. Next year, it may expand to 25.
Okay, there you go.
Jill Wright has delighted little ones as their preschool teacher for 33 years here.
Are you ready, Mr. Miles?
She said expanding the hours to full-day preschool 3 years ago began the growth, and the small-town culture has kept it going.
And I think our culture, we're just such a close-knit family here at our school, and I'm very honored to be working at our school. And
you can tell she cares deeply.
Yeah, that's what we need on this guy.
In the upper-level electives, you can still see the small school numbers. Computer science instructor Jake Lopez says 3 to 5 kids in a class is typical. This is a robotics group.
We could hook it up.
He works hard to adapt the science to his students' lifestyle.
You know, computer science especially bleeds into a lot of different disciplines, you know, farming, ranching, forestry, you name it. It's the tentacles of technology is getting into everything.
I have probably the best students, I think, in the state.
I met Lindy Cruz in her ag classroom where they're raising chicks. She also attended this school and is still connected to the land.
I'm a 6th-generation cattle rancher here as well as ag teacher, and so, you know, some of the especially legislation that goes through sometimes can impact us in a negative way. They don't, I mean, unless you were boots on the ground in Eastern Oregon on a ranch, on a farm, you know, hay ranch, even if you live in rural Prairie City, you know, without kind of coming out here and understanding. But I think it goes both ways too. I think that, you know, people from Eastern Oregon need to understand both sides, and you know, it shouldn't be East versus West. We need to have a common ground. I think that's where our state's been divided.
She's done some thinking about how to get urban and rural communities to understand each other.
What would be most impactful is to get them out on the ranches, get them out on the farms, take them in the downtown, I don't know, Portland, Salem businesses, and get people exposed, and, you know, do like a day in the life of a rancher, a day in the life of, you know, and maybe it would be needed to do more than just a day. Maybe a politician comes and spends a week with a ranching family or a farming family, and maybe, you know, the Eastern Oregon representatives, a day in the life of a small business owner in Portland.
I think that's been a big difference.
Casey Hallgarth is the superintendent and the principal.
You know, when you come here, the big difference is the funding and what's available.
He's learned to navigate on a limited budget.
We don't have the tax base here to pass the bonds like over on the west side. So, when we run into leaky roofs or, something that needs to be fixed, we usually have to plan 2-3 years out, sock it away and then to pay for it. So
he's also made strategic alliances with online schools, including Oregon Connections Academy. Hallgarth said Prairie City's affiliation with the school now has roughly 1,300 students. Prairie City gets a fee for each student, but he also likes that it's a convenient option for students who don't do well in a traditional classroom. Prairie City has also signed on with Oregon Preparatory Academy, and that program is growing as well. And then there is the grant writing. He applies for lots of grants to help pay for things at the school.
But without the grants, you wouldn't see a lot of these improvements, unfortunately. And that's just because of like I said, the tax base and the funding and the way it works. And, you only get so much money per kid, and when you don't have a lot of kids.
It doesn't go far. He makes up for it with grants. Over the last 5 years, he's secured more than $7 million in grants for Prairie City School. That is what it takes to run a thriving school in small-town Oregon. I have to say, I really love being in Prairie City. It seems like a fantastic community, thanks to everybody who talked to me out there. And I love that idea of lawmakers from the big city spending a week living on an Eastern Oregon ranch. I really hope somebody starts an exchange program like that. So the folks in the city and the folks in the country can kind of get to know each other, maybe understand each other better. By the way, if you missed any of our Greater Idaho series, we have a full special report streaming right now on KGW+. That's our streaming app on Roku and Amazon Fire. And if you don't have one of those devices, you can always find our content on the KGW YouTube page. Just scroll down and look for The Story.